Well, Dr. Blizzard, in Matthew 1:21, we read that the angel says to Mary, "You will give birth to a son and you'll call his name Jesus because he will save his people from their sins." Now, we know that it doesn't mean that in the Hebrew. So why don't you explain to us, what does this term mean, to be saved?
Well, it's interesting, Stewart, but not only interesting, it's important, but it takes a little bit of time to set the background, the foundation for understanding of what it actually means. Let's take a look here at another passage in Luke chapter 19, verse number 10. "For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost." That was the purpose of his coming, and that was the reason why his name was Yeshua. And it comes from the Hebrew word yasha, which means save. And the passage that I just quoted here in Luke 19:10 says that this was his purpose, that the Son of Man came to seek and to save those that were lost. Now, that passage has been widely quoted and still is unto this day, but what does it mean? I've got to set a background for your understanding. Try to make this as short as I possibly can. But you have to understand how the rabbi in Jesus' day taught. And they taught by using 4 different methods for teaching that formed an acrostic known as pardes. Pardes means a garden in which fruit is gathered from a tree, nourishing, sustaining fruit. And so they use this as an acrostic for their message, whatever it might have been. The first was pshat, which meant the simple meaning or the simple interpretation. The second was remez. Remez meaning to hint. And I want to emphasize that Jesus was a master at remez, or a master at hinting. He's always hinting back at something. Now keep in mind that they had all of this material already memorized. So all he had to do was to mention a word, or use a word, or refer to a passage, and the whole passage exploded in their minds because they had the whole thing committed to memory. And this particular passage here in Luke 19:10, "The Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost," is remez. And if you understand that, anytime you hear Jesus speak, you can ask yourself the question, where did he get that? Where did he quote from that particular passage? And if you know the biblical text well enough, you can even go and find where he spoke, where he referred to that particular passage. This particular passage is a remez, or a hint, back at Ezekiel chapter 34. Now, if you'll turn to Ezekiel chapter 34, we'll have a look at what he is saying. In Ezekiel chapter 34, he says, "I will feed my flock. I will feed them in a good pasture. I will cause them to lie down, saith the Lord. I will seek that which was lost, and bring again that which was driven away, and will bind up that which was broken. He was quoting from this exact passage. And so what does it mean to be saved, to be saved? Here, as you look at this passage, it means to be healed, to be safe, to be secure. And to be lost means just the opposite. So it's not what you sometimes hear from the pulpit, or you read from other authors who are writing on the subject. It means that the person who is saved is made whole. They're made safe. They're made secure in God. And those that are lost are just the opposite.
You use a really poignant illustration once I listened to you speaking on the subject, and you mentioned the woman with the issue of blood.
Yes.
And you said she was lost in a way that none of us could ever understand. And that really illustrated the opposite of being saved. You spoke about her situation, and you spoke about her affliction, and according to the passage in Ezekiel 34, she was lost in a way that Ezekiel is speaking about, and Jesus, speaking about his own ministry, says, I've come to seek and to save them that were lost. Can you just embellish on that just a little? And
well,
use that
this
illustration
is
as
a
well.
fantastic passage to illustrate what we're talking about right here. But you have to know the Hebrew in order to get to it. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to take you to the Hebrew and show you here in verse 20 of Matthew 9, this little woman who's lost in a way that we don't understand. She was an anathema in her community, in her home. She couldn't have any relations with her husband. She couldn't sit on the same seat on which they sat without making it unclean. So again, it was just like she was an anathema.
And just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the audience needs to understand that the laws of clean and unclean defined her behavior very clearly. And according to Torah, she was forbidden to have certain privileges that you and I take for granted.
It defined her condition in the community. But this is what we're reading right here in Matthew chapter 9, verse 20. And I'd like for those of you that are following along to turn to this passage and follow along with me, because in the Hebrew text it's so dramatic. It's not so dramatic, I think, in English as it is in the Hebrew when you see what's happening. Once you know, and this is the one thing that I want to establish at this particular point, that the word Jesus, Yeshua, Yasha, comes from the Hebrew word that means save. Save. Yeshua means save. And here you have this little woman who has the issue of blood, and this is in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 20. And let's have a look at it. Issue, Ishazvat dam shtemes l'shana. She had an issue of blood 12 years, and she nigsha me'acharav v'tika b'tzitik bigdo. And she comes up and she touches the hem of his garment. What did she do? Why did she do it? She touches the tzitzit of his beged. What's a tzitzit? On the Jewish prayer shawl, even until today, there are these little fringes that hang down from the prayer shawl that are tied in a certain way. And in Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41, it's told why they're to put these tzitzit on the beged, or the garment, so that they can remember all of the commandments of the Lord God to do them. Tzitzit, when it's reduced to its numerical equivalent, it stands for 600. And it consists of 8 cords and 5 knots, which added together is 13. 613 is the total number of laws. And it has a series of windings. The first is 7, second is 8 equals 15, which stands for the Yud-Hey, and the next is 11, stands for the Vav, and the last series of windings, 13, stands for a Hal. Now, so what happens is that this little woman, it says, she comes up from behind Jesus, and she touches the tzitzit of his garment. She reaches out and grabs the tzitzit because she says within herself, Ki amra b'liba, she said within her heart, Ach, im egar rak b'tzitzit bigdo, ivashea. Do you hear that? Yeshua ivashea. It's the same root word, except this time it means that if I reach out and touch the beged, or the tzitzit of his beged, I will be whole. Ivasheh, I'll be saved. Vayipen Yeshua me'acharav ota v'yar ota. He said to her that his power had gone out, and he says, BT, my daughter. And it's important here, I think, to notice that he calls this little woman his daughter.
BT, yeah.
He said BT, which means what?
My daughter.
No. What does that imply?
Oh, that she's family.
That she was already going to go to heaven.
Yeah.
She was already a part of the kingdom. But she was still lost, because she had this issue of blood that caused her to be an anathema in her community. And he says to her, Biti, emunatech hoshielach. He said, my daughter, your faith has saved you. Emunatech hoshielach. And it says, V'tivasha ha'isha min hashaha ahi. And the woman was saved from that hour, for she was made whole from that hour.
Let me interrupt you just 1 minute. I think if you can explain to our audience why she touched the fringe or the tzitzit that was on the corner of his prayer shawl. Why did she actually do that? What made her do that? Because I think that reflects.
What made her do that was her knowledge of Malachi.
Right.
The last chapter.
Mm-hmm.
What does it say?
And the Son of Man shall come with healing in his wings.
Yeah. And the
So
Son
what
of
are the
Man,
wings?
the Son of Man will come with healing in his wings, is what it says in the English. But if you look in the Hebrew, in Malachi, the last chapter, chapter 4, it says in the Hebrew that he's going to come with healing in his kanaf, in his wings. Kanaf is wings, and it means the fringes on the edge of the garment.
So
the
the
healing
corners-
in his wings.
The corners of the breast shawl were actually called kanaf.
Kanaf, they call it.
And-
the wings.
And she really believed.
And she knew that.
Yeah. And so her faith in that belief, in what God had said, was what she acted upon.
Hoshiabach,
Right. And
what saved her
it has saved you.
and made her whole.
So what happened to her that we can say she is saved?
That she was whole. She was cleansed of her issue of blood, which meant that now she was restored with her husband, restored with her children, restored with the members of the community, and she was made whole.
And so according to Torah, she could now touch her loved ones
Yes.
and sit on the same chair as her loved one, which she was forbidden or prohibited to do before because of the laws of clean and unclean. And so for 12 years, she was banished to loneliness and separateness and was lost to all of those comforts and those relationships. But having been touched or having been cleansed and made whole by Yeshua, she now is restored and has those relationships all restored to her.
But here's the thing, here, Stewart, that some listeners might say, well, but that was just an exception. Now, this is just a little exception here in the biblical text. The people didn't really do that on a regular basis. But if you look at Matthew chapter 14, and we'll do this as quick as we can. In verse 35, Matthew 14, it says, "And when the men of that place," not just a little woman, but the men, plural, of that place, "had knowledge of him, they sent out into the country round about, and they brought unto him all that were diseased, and they besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment." That's in Matthew 35, in Matthew 14, 35 and 36. And let us note here in verse 36, "Vayivakshu mimenu," and they requested of him, "Ki yig'au rak b'tzitzit bigdo," that they requested of him that they might just touch the tzitzit, again the tzitzit, the fringe, of his garment. And it says, "V'chol hanogim no sha'u." No sha'u. Hear that? Yeshua, Yasha, and all that touched were made completely whole.
So Yeshua is healing and he is fulfilling his purpose, but also he is effectively preaching the gospel of the kingdom, because that's what it's all about. So if you are enjoying these broadcasts, and I sitting talking to you, Dr. Roy Blizzard, I am enjoying this immensely. If you want to share this with others, hit the share button right now and help us to share this information with as many people as possible.